Princess Kira sat in her room at the palace, looking out at the 3 moons of her home world. She was 25 years old and had lived her whole life hearing stories about humans. The old teachers and guards would tell tales of a warrior race that lived far away in the galaxy. They said humans were so dangerous that no empire dared to fight them. They said humans never surrendered and never ran from battle. But Kira didn't believe these stories. She had studied at the best academy in the empire. She knew about science and logic. How could one species be so special? Her people, the Valarans, had weapons that could destroy planets. They had shields that could stop almost anything. The idea that primitive warriors from some distant world could be a real threat seemed silly to her. Her father, the Emperor, sometimes mentioned the humans during council meetings. He spoke of old treaties that said no one should bother the human territory. But Kira thought this was just politics. Maybe humans were good at making themselves sound scary. That didn't mean they really were. Now, as she prepared for her diplomatic mission, those old stories felt far away. She was going to visit the Tertian sector to discuss trade agreements. It was boring work, but it was her duty as a princess. She put on her best ceremonial robes, the ones that shimmered with silver and blue light. She looked like royalty should look. Commander Velnar waited for her at the ship. He was an old soldier, with scales that had turned gray with age. He had fought in many battles and wore his scars with pride. When he saw Kira, he bowed deeply. "Your Highness, the ship is ready. We have 6 escort vessels for protection." Kira nodded and walked up the ramp into her diplomatic vessel. The ship was beautiful, with walls made of crystal that showed the stars outside. Her quarters had comfortable furniture and all the things she needed for the long journey. She settled in and tried to read reports, but she felt restless. The journey through space was supposed to take 3 days. Everything went smoothly at first. Kira spent her time reading, talking with her advisors, and preparing her speeches. She practiced looking diplomatic and calm. This was her first major mission, and she wanted to make her father proud. On the 2nd day, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. Kira jumped up from her seat, her heart pounding. Red lights flashed in the corridors. She ran to the command center, where Velnar was shouting orders to the crew. "What's happening?" Kira demanded. Velnar turned to her, his face grave. "Krellick's warships. Your Highness. They came out of nowhere. They must have been waiting for us." Through the main screen, Kira could see enemy ships attacking her escort vessels. The Kralliks were warriors from a brutal empire that wanted to expand its territory. They had been threatening Valara's borders for years. But attacking a diplomatic convoy? That was an act of war. "Why would they attack us?" Kira asked, watching in horror, as one of her escort ships exploded. "You are the Emperor's only daughter," Velnar said grimly. "If they capture you, they can force your father to give them what they want. They can demand territory, resources, or safe passage through our space." The ship shook violently as weapons fire hit the shields. Kira grabbed onto a railing to keep from falling. She had never been in real danger before. The palace had always been safe. Even her travels had been carefully protected. But now, she was in the middle of a battle, and her guards were dying trying to protect her. "We need to evacuate you," Velnar said, grabbing her arm. 3 royal guards surrounded Kira as they ran through the shaking corridors. Explosions rocked the ship. Sparks fell from damaged control panels. Crew members rushed past them, trying to save the ship, trying to save their princess. But Kira could see it in their eyes. They knew they were losing. They reached the pod bay, and Velnar started opening one of the escape pods. These small ships were designed to keep one person alive and get them to the nearest safe planet. They had limited supplies but strong shields, and could travel fast. "Get in, Your Highness," Velnar urged. Just then, an explosion tore through the wall. Kira screamed as she saw Krallick's soldiers pouring through the breach. They wore black armor that seemed to swallow light. Their weapons glowed with deadly energy. They moved like trained killers, fast and efficient. Velnar pushed Kira toward the pod. Go! Now! The guards formed a line between the princess and the enemy. They fired their weapons, fighting with everything they had. Velnar stood at the front, his shield glowing as he blocked enemy fire. He turned his head slightly and looked at Kira one last time. Remember your duty, Your Highness. Survive. Then he charged at the Kralix warriors. The other guards followed him. Kira wanted to help, wanted to fight, but her hands were shaking too much. She had never held a weapon in her life. Royalty didn't fight. They had soldiers for that. With tears streaming down her face, Kira climbed into the pod and sealed the hatch. Through the small window, she could see the guards falling one by one. She saw Velnar go down, his shield finally breaking under the enemy fire. She screamed his name, but the pod was already launching. The small ship shot out into space, just as her diplomatic vessel exploded behind her. The blast wave hit the pod, sending it spinning. Kira was thrown against the restraints, the breath knocked from her lungs. When she could finally look out the window again, all she saw was debris. Pieces of her ship floated among the stars. Her guards, her crew, everyone who had tried to protect her, was gone. The pod's computer started making sounds, trying to find a safe place to go. Kira watched the screen, hoping it would find a Velaron outpost or maybe a friendly station. But the navigation system was damaged. Sparks flew from one of the control panels. The computer kept changing its mind, coordinates flashing across the screen, faster than she could read. When the system finally locked onto a destination, Kira felt her blood turn cold. The screen showed a yellow sun, with 9 planets orbiting it. The third planet was blue and green, covered in water and land. The computer had a name for it in the old galactic database. Earth, the human homeworld. No, Kira whispered. Computer, find another destination. Find any other destination. But the computer didn't respond. The pod was already heading toward Earth, and she couldn't stop it. The navigation system was broken. She was trapped inside this small ship, flying toward the most dangerous world in the galaxy. If the stories were true. For 3 days, Kira floated through space in the tiny pod. She had little food and water. She couldn't sleep much because every time she closed her eyes, she saw Velnar and the guards dying to save her. She was alone, truly alone, for the first time in her life. As Earth grew larger in the window, Kira tried to remember everything she had learned about humans. They were supposed to be primitive compared to galactic standards. They had only recently discovered how to leave their own planet. Their weapons were simple, their technology basic. But the old stories said they were survivors. They said humans fought differently than any other species. They said humans never knew when they were beaten. The pod started shaking as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Kira strapped herself in tighter, watching through the window as the sky turned from black to blue. She could see clouds and oceans now. She could see green forests and tall mountains. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The landing system wasn't working properly. Alarms blared louder and louder. The pod was falling too fast, spinning as it dropped through the sky. Kira closed her eyes and prayed to the old gods of Velara. She prayed that if humans were real, they wouldn't be as scary as the legends said. The pod hit something, maybe trees, and everything went crazy. Metal screamed. The world spun. Something hard hit Kira's head, and everything went dark for a moment. When she opened her eyes again, everything was still and quiet. She was alive. Slowly, carefully, Kira opened the pod's hatch. She stepped out onto alien ground and looked around. She was in a forest, surrounded by tall trees, unlike anything on her world. The air smelled strange but not unpleasant. Birds sang in the branches above. It was peaceful and wild and completely foreign. Kira took a few steps away from the pod, her legs shaking. She had survived the attack. She had survived the crash. But now she was stranded on a world full of the galaxy's most feared warriors. And somewhere above, the Kralliks were probably already searching for her. She was alone, injured, and lost on Earth. And she had no idea what to do next. Jake Mitchell had been hunting in the Montana wilderness for 3 days. He was 28 years old and had served in the Marines for 6 years before leaving to become a wilderness guide. He loved these trips alone in the forest. No phones, no people. Just him and nature. It was peaceful after all the chaos of military life. He was tracking a deer through the trees when he heard a sound like thunder. Jake looked up at the clear blue sky. Confused. There were no storm clouds. But something was definitely making noise up there. Then he saw it. A streak of fire falling from the sky, trailing smoke as it crashed somewhere in the forest ahead. Jake's military training kicked in immediately. He grabbed his rifle and started running toward the crash site. Maybe it was a plane. Maybe someone needed help. His boots pounded on the forest floor as he pushed through branches and jumped over fallen logs. The sound had been loud. Really loud. Whatever fell had been big. It didn't take long to find the crash site. Trees were knocked down in a line leading to a clearing. In the middle of the destruction sat something that definitely wasn't a plane. It looked like a giant metal egg, half buried in the dirt. The surface was smooth and covered with strange symbols that glowed faintly. Jake approached slowly, his rifle ready. He had seen a lot of weird things during his time in the military, but nothing like this. The metal was warm to the touch and hummed slightly. There was a hatch on the side, hanging open. He looked inside and his breath caught in his throat. The interior was like something from a science fiction movie. Lights blinked on control panels, covered in alien writing, and slumped against the far wall was a woman, but not like any woman Jake had ever seen. Her skin had a light purple color to it. Her hair was long and flowed in shades of silver and blue. She wore fancy robes that seemed to glow with their own light, though they were torn and dirty now. As Jake watched, her eyes opened. They were golden, with pupils like a cat's. She looked at him with fear and confusion. The woman tried to say something, but the words made no sense. They were musical and flowing, like nothing Jake had ever heard before. Then something on her collar started glowing, and suddenly he could understand her. "Please don't hurt me. I am Princess Kira of Valara. I need help." Jake lowered his rifle a bit but kept it ready. A princess. An alien princess. In Montana. He had definitely not expected this when he started his hunting trip. "Easy there," Jake said in his calmest voice. "I'm not going to hurt you." The woman, Kira, seemed surprised that he could understand her. She touched her collar, which must have been some kind of translator. "I have some injuries, but nothing serious. But there are warriors hunting me. The Kralliks. They will kill anyone who helps me. Can they track you here?" "Not right now. My ship systems are destroyed. But they will search for me. They will come to this world." Jake thought about this. The smart thing would be to call the authorities. Let the government deal with an alien princess and enemy warriors. But Jake had dealt with the government before. He knew how slow they could be, how complicated things could get. And this woman looked scared and alone. "All right, princess. Let's get you somewhere safe first. We'll figure out the rest later." He held out his hand. "Name's Jake. Jake Mitchell." Kira stared at his hand for a moment. Then she reached out and took it. Her hand was smaller than his, and her skin was cool to the touch. Jake helped her stand up. Accident, malleable, and up. She was shorter than him and seemed weak from the crash. "The stories say humans are warriors without mercy," Kira said quietly. "They say your kind only knows violence." Jake couldn't help but laugh a little. "Yeah, well, stories tend to make things sound more dramatic than they are. Come on, my camp is about 2 miles from here. Can you walk that far?" Quote, Kira nodded, though she looked unsteady on her feet. Jake kept close to her as they walked through the forest. He watched her carefully, ready to catch her if she fell. He also kept his eyes on the trees around them, watching for any signs of these Kralix warriors she mentioned. As they walked, Jake studied his new companion. She moved carefully, like someone not used to rough terrain. Her robes kept catching on branches, and she wasn't wearing proper shoes for hiking, but she didn't complain. She just kept walking, determined to keep up with him. "What are these Kralix?" Jake asked as they crossed a stream. "Why are they after you?" Kira took a moment to catch her breath before answering. "The Kralix are a warrior empire. They want to expand their territory. If they capture me, they can use me as a hostage against my father. He is the Emperor of Velara. They would force him to let them pass through our space. From there, they could threaten many other worlds, including Earth. Eventually, yes. Your world sits in a strategic location, though you don't know it yet. Most species avoid this sector because of the stories about humans." Jake helped her over a fallen log. "What kind of stories?" "Stories that say humans are the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. That you fight when any logical species would surrender. That you form bonds so strong you will die for complete strangers." She looked at him with those strange golden eyes. "The stories say 3 different empires signed treaties to simply leave humans alone because fighting you would cost too much." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Sounds like we have quite a reputation. Though I'd say most humans are just trying to get by, same as anyone else. We just don't like being pushed around." I mean, they reached Jake's camp as the sun was getting lower in the sky. It was a simple setup, just a tent, a fire pit, and his supplies. Jake gave Kira some water and dug through his pack for food that her translator said she could safely eat. As night fell, Jake built a fire. The temperature was dropping, and Kira was shivering in her thin robes. He gave her his jacket, which looked huge on her, but seemed to help. They sat by the fire, and Jake listened as Kira told him more about her situation. She explained about the attack on her ship, about how her guards had died protecting her. Jake could see the pain in her eyes as she talked about it. He had seen that same look in the mirror after losing friends in combat. Survivor's guilt was the same, no matter what planet you were from. "So, these Kralix," Jake said, poking the fire with a stick. "How long before they find you here?" "Maybe a few days, maybe a week. They have advanced scanners. Eventually, they will locate me. Maybe a week later." "And your people? Can they send help?" Kira's expression turned sad. "By the time any message reaches my home and a rescue fleet arrives, it will be months. I will be dead or captured long before then." Jake nodded, thinking. "In the morning, we need to head toward civilization. I have a satellite phone in my truck, but that's a 2-day hike from here. We can call for help, get you somewhere secure." "I should leave," Kira said suddenly. "I should not put you in danger. You have already done more than anyone could ask. Tomorrow, I will go alone." "You're not going anywhere alone," Jake said firmly. "You're injured, in unfamiliar territory, and being hunted by alien soldiers. You wouldn't last a day." He smiled slightly. "Besides, helping an alien princess escape from bad guys is definitely more interesting than shooting a deer." Despite everything, Kira smiled back. It was a small smile, but genuine. "You make jokes even when facing danger." The stories mentioned that about humans. Over the next 2 days, Jake taught Kira basic survival skills. He showed her how to move quietly through the forest, stepping carefully to avoid making noise. He taught her which plants were safe to touch and which ones to avoid. He showed her how to filter water from the stream so she could drink it safely. Kira learned quickly. She paid attention and asked smart questions. Jake was impressed by how fast she adapted. For someone who had probably never spent a day outside a palace, she was doing remarkably well. On the morning of the 3rd day, Jake woke up early. Something felt wrong. He had learned to trust his instincts in the military, and his instincts were screaming danger. He woke Kira quietly, and signaled for her to stay silent. Moving carefully, Jake crept to the edge of their camp. Through the trees, he saw something that made his blood run cold. 3 figures were moving through the forest, scanning the area with handheld devices. They wore black armor that seemed to absorb light, making them hard to see. These had to be the Kralix warriors Kira had warned him about. Jake moved back to Kira and put his finger to his lips. He pointed toward the enemy and gestured for her to follow him. They needed to move. Now. But as they started to slip away, one of the Kralix turned its scanning device in their direction. The device made a high-pitched beeping sound. They had been spotted. Jake grabbed Kira's hand and ran. Behind them, he could hear the Kralix soldiers crashing through the forest in pursuit. He led Kira through the densest part of the trees, using his knowledge of the terrain to his advantage. But the Kralix were fast. Faster than human soldiers would be. They reached a rocky area with lots of boulders. Jake pulled Kira behind a large rock and checked his rifle. He had 1 magazine loaded and 2 more in his pack. Not much, but it would have to do. "Stay here," he whispered to Kira. "Stay low, and don't move unless I tell you to." "Jake, no. They will kill you. Maybe. But I'm not going to let them take you without a fight." Jake moved away from Kira, circling around to get a better position. He could see the 3 Kralix warriors now, moving more carefully as they searched for their prey. They held weapons that glowed with blue energy. Jake had no idea what those weapons could do, but he didn't want to find out. He took aim at the nearest warrior. His hand was steady, his breathing calm. This was just like any other combat situation, he told himself. Just another enemy. The fact that they were aliens didn't change the basics of combat. Jake squeezed the trigger. The rifle shot echoed through the forest like thunder. The first Kralix warrior went down before the others even realized they were under attack. The sound of the gunshot seemed to confuse them. They spun around, trying to find where the attack came from. Their weapons raised and ready. Jake was already moving to a new position. He had learned in the Marines that staying in one place after shooting was a good way to get killed. The second Kralix spotted him and fired its weapon. A beam of bright blue energy shot past Jake's head, so close he could feel the heat. The beam hit a tree behind him, and the tree exploded into flames. Jake rolled behind a boulder and fired twice more. His shots hit the second warrior in the gaps between its armor plates. The alien fell, its weapon clattering to the ground. 2 down, 1 to go. But Jake knew his luck wouldn't last. The third warrior was smarter than the others. Instead of rushing forward, it was moving toward where Kira was hiding. Jake realized what the warrior was doing. It was going to use Kira as bait. Force Jake to come out of cover. Jake cursed under his breath and broke from his hiding spot, running to intercept the warrior. It was risky, leaving himself exposed like this, but he couldn't let that thing reach Kira. The Kralix warrior turned and fired at Jake. He dove to the side, feeling the heat of the energy blast pass over him. He hit the ground hard, knocking the wind from his lungs. The warrior was advancing on him now, its weapon charging for another shot. This was it. Jake couldn't dodge in time. Then something unexpected happened. Kira appeared behind the warrior, holding a large branch like a club. She swung it with all her strength at the warrior's head. The impact wasn't enough to seriously hurt it through the armor, but it knocked the warrior's aim off. The energy blast went wide, shooting into the sky. Jake didn't waste the opportunity. He fired his last 3 shots, and the third warrior fell. The forest went quiet, except for the crackling of the burning tree. Jake lay on the ground for a moment, catching his breath. Then he slowly got up and walked over to where Kira stood, still holding the branch, her whole body shaking. "You okay?" Jake asked, gently taking the branch from her hands. "I fought," Kira said, her voice trembling. "I have never fought before in my life. In my culture, royalty does not engage in combat. We have soldiers who fight for us." Jake checked the fallen Kralix warriors to make sure they were really dead. Well, you're on Earth now. Here, everyone fights when they have to. Kira looked down at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. I thought I would be too afraid. But when I saw that warrior about to kill you, I just moved. I didn't think. That's called instinct. Means you're tougher than you thought. Jake gathered the alien weapons and started looking through the warrior's equipment. But we have a bigger problem now. If there are 3 warriors here, there are probably more coming. And now they know I'm helping you. They spent the next hour covering their tracks as best they could and gathering supplies from the dead warriors. Jake took their weapons, ammunition packs, and communication devices. He had no idea how to use most of it, but Kira seemed to understand the technology. She started taking apart one of the weapons, adjusting something inside. What are you doing? Jake asked. Modifying this weapon. The Kralix design their guns for long-range combat. But for close defense, we need faster firing with less power. She reconnected some parts and handed the weapon to Jake. Try this now. Jake held the alien gun. It was lighter than he expected and hummed slightly in his hands. You know your way around these things. I studied engineering before my diplomatic training, Kira explained as she worked on another weapon. My father believed that leaders should understand how things work, not just order others to make them work. They couldn't stay in the area. Jake led them deeper into the wilderness, away from the crash site and the dead warriors. They walked for hours, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and any other Kralix that might be searching. By the time night fell, they were both exhausted. Jake knew they needed a better plan than just running. They needed a defensible position and a way to call for help. He thought about the old ranger station he had seen on his map. It was abandoned, but sturdy, built of thick logs and stone. It was also near Silver Creek, about a day's hike from where they were now. We're going to head to an old building I know about, Jake told Kira as they rested. It's got solid walls and a good defensive position. Plus, there's an old radio set up there. If I can get it working, we can call for help. Will your people believe you? Kira asked. Will they help? I don't know, Jake admitted. But we have to try. We can't keep running forever. They reached the ranger station the next afternoon. The building was exactly as Jake remembered it, a solid log structure nestled in a rocky canyon. The door was locked, but Jake managed to break it open. Inside, the place was dusty but intact. There were old supplies, furniture, and most importantly, a radio system mounted on the wall. Jake immediately went to work on the radio while Kira explored the building. The radio was old, but well built. After some tinkering and connecting a car battery he found in the storage room, Jake managed to get power to it. The radio crackled to life, though the signal was weak. We need a better antenna, Jake muttered, looking at the setup. Something to boost the signal. Something to boost the signal. While Jake worked on improving the radio, Kira started preparing the ranger station for defense. She had watched Jake fight the Kralix warriors and learned from his tactics. She helped him board up windows, leaving only small gaps to shoot through. They arranged furniture to create barriers and cover. They set up the alien weapons at strategic points around the building. You learn fast, Jake commented as they worked together. I am good at adapting, Kira replied. It is a skill I developed growing up in a palace full of political schemes, though I never thought I would use it to prepare for battle. By evening, Jake had managed to boost the radio signal, using parts from the ranger station and some copper wire. He started broadcasting on military frequencies, sending out a distress signal. He didn't know if anyone would hear it or believe it, but it was their best chance. This is Jake Mitchell, former Marine Corps, serial number 874321. I am at the Silver Creek Ranger Station with a refugee under attack by hostile forces. Requesting immediate assistance. Repeat. Requesting immediate assistance. He broadcast the message over and over, hoping someone, somewhere, was listening. As night fell, they took turns keeping watch. Jake showed Kira how to use both the rifle and the modified alien weapons. She was a quick learner, her hands steady as she practiced aiming. "Can I ask you something?" Kira said during her watch shift, while Jake was trying to rest. "Sure. Why are you helping me? You could have left me at the crash site. You could have walked away when the Krolix appeared. Why risk your life for someone you just met?" Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about the question. In the military, we had a saying, "Leave no one behind." Doesn't matter who they are or where they're from. If someone needs help and you can give it, you do. That's just how it should be. Why? That is not logical, Kira said. From a purely practical standpoint, abandoning me would increase your chances of survival. Maybe. But I've got to live with myself after this is over. I couldn't do that if I left you to die. Jake smiled in the darkness. Besides, where I come from, we have another saying. It's the right thing to do. That's reason enough. Kira was silent for a long time. Then she said softly, "I was wrong about humans. The stories made you sound like mindless warriors. But you are not mindless at all. You choose to fight for others. That is not savage. That is noble." The Krolix came at dawn. Kira saw them first. Multiple figures moving through the trees around the ranger station. She woke Jake immediately, and they both took up their positions. Through the gaps in the boarded windows, they counted 12 warriors, much more than before. "They're not taking any chances this time," Jake said, checking his weapons. "They've brought a whole squad." "They're free. Can we win?" Kira asked, though she already knew the answer. "Honestly, probably not, but we can make them work for it." Jake looked at her seriously. "Stay low. Aim carefully. And don't waste shots. If things go bad, there's a back door that leads to the canyon. You run, and don't look back." "I will not leave you," Kira said firmly. "If it comes to that, you have to. You're a princess. Your people need you. I'm just a guy who likes hunting." Before Kira could argue, the first energy blast hit the ranger station. The battle had begun. The Krolix fired at the building, their weapons tearing chunks out of the log walls. Jake and Kira returned fire, forcing the warriors to take cover. The modified alien weapons that Kira had adjusted worked perfectly, firing faster and giving them a better chance in close quarters. The fight lasted for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. Jake's training and experience showed as he called out targets and coordinated their defense. Kira followed his instructions, her fear turning into focused determination. They managed to take down 3 of the warriors, but the others were getting closer, working together to surround the building. Jake was down to his last magazine for the rifle. One of the alien weapons had overheated and stopped working. The Krolix were preparing for a final assault. This was it. Jake looked at Kira and saw the same realization in her eyes. They had fought well, but it wasn't going to be enough. Then, cutting through the sound of battle, they heard something new. A deep, rhythmic thumping that grew louder and louder. Jake's heart jumped. He knew that sound. He had heard it 1,000 times during his military service. Helicopters. Through the gaps in the walls, Jake saw them coming over the canyon rim. 3 large military helicopters, with 2 smaller attack helicopters flying alongside them. The Krolix warriors saw them too and tried to reposition, but they were too slow. The attack helicopters opened fire, their guns tearing into the Krolix positions. The aliens, caught completely by surprise, tried to fight back, but their weapons weren't designed to target fast-moving aircraft. Within seconds, the battle turned from a desperate last stand into a rescue operation. The large helicopters dropped ropes, and soldiers in tactical gear fast roped down to the ground. They moved with the precision of special forces, engaging the remaining Krolix warriors with overwhelming firepower. It was over in minutes. Jake and Kira stayed in the ranger station until they heard someone calling out in English. Jake Mitchell. This is Captain Sarah Blake, United States Special Forces. We received your distress call. Are you secure? Jake opened the door carefully, his hands visible. We're secure. We've got wounded, and a refugee who needs protection. A woman in combat gear approached, her rifle lowered but ready. She looked at Jake, then past him to where Kira stood in the doorway, and her eyes went wide with shock. Captain Sarah Blake had been in the military for 12 years and had seen combat in 4 different countries. She was trained to handle almost any situation with calm professionalism, but standing in front of an actual alien was not something her training had covered. She stared at Princess Kira for a long moment before regaining her composure. Captain Blake, Jake said, stepping forward. This is Princess Kira of Velara. She's being hunted by those warriors you just fought. She needs protection and help getting home. Sarah looked between Jake and Kira, then at the dead Kralix warriors scattered around the ranger station. Her team was already securing the area and examining the alien bodies. One of her soldiers called out that the aliens were definitely dead and definitely not from Earth. Mitchell, I'm going to need a full explanation of what's happening here, Sarah said, her hand still resting on her weapon. But first, let's get you both to safety. We've got medical personnel standing by. Within minutes, the area was swarming with military personnel. Medics checked Jake and Kira for injuries. Communications specialists were setting up equipment. Scientists in protective suits were examining the Kralix bodies and their weapons. And through it all, more helicopters kept arriving, bringing senior officers and government officials. Jake and Kira were separated for debriefing. Jake was taken to a command tent, where he spent 3 hours explaining everything that had happened. From finding Kira's crashed pod to the battle at the ranger station, the officers listened carefully, taking notes and recording everything. Some of them looked skeptical, but the evidence was hard to deny. Dead aliens and alien technology were scattered all over the forest. In another tent, Kira was being examined by doctors and questioned by intelligence officers. She answered their questions as best she could, explaining about the Kralix, about the galactic situation, and about why she had crashed on Earth. She told them that more Kralix ships were probably searching for her right now, and that Earth itself might be in danger. By nightfall, the entire area had been transformed into a military base. Soldiers patrolled the perimeter. Radar systems scanned the sky. And in the largest tent, a meeting was taking place that would change everything. General Frank Morrison was 60 years old and had served his country for 4 decades. He had gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He sat at a table with his senior staff, looking at the reports coming in from the science teams. The aliens were real. Their technology was far beyond anything humans had, and there were more of them coming. How many ships are in orbit? Morrison asked his intelligence officer. 6 that we can detect, sir, Kralix warships. They're staying above our satellite range, but we can see them with our telescopes. They're not hiding. Have they made contact? Yes, sir. About an hour ago, they sent a message in English. They demanded we hand over Princess Kira. They threatened military action if we refuse. Morrison sat back in his chair, thinking, what does the princess say about their capabilities? Lieutenant Kate Stevens, a young officer with experience in weapons analysis, spoke up. Sir, we've examined the Kralix weapons and armor. Their technology is incredibly advanced. Based on what we've seen, their ships could devastate our military installations before we could effectively respond. We're talking about weapons that can target from orbit with pinpoint accuracy, so we can't win a fight with them. Morrison said flatly. Not a conventional fight, no sir. But, Stevens pulled up data on a tablet. We've been analyzing their tactics from the battle recordings. The Kralix are overconfident. They rely heavily on technological superiority. They expect enemies to retreat when outmatched. They've never fought an opponent who refuses to break, who adapts, and fights dirty. Morrison understood what she was saying, like Mitchell did. Exactly, sir. He used terrain, surprise, and unpredictable tactics. The Kralliks didn't know how to respond. They kept expecting him to run, but he didn't. Another officer, Major Chris Adams, added his thoughts. "Sir, we need to consider the political situation. If we hand over the princess, we look weak. Every hostile power on Earth, and apparently beyond, will see us as pushovers. But if we fight, we could be starting a war we can't win." Morrison nodded slowly. "Get Mitchell and the princess in here. I want to hear from them directly." 10 minutes later, Jake and Kira entered the command tent. They both looked tired. Jake's clothes were dirty and torn. Kira's robes were stained with dirt and blood. But they walked in, with their heads up, standing together. "Mr. Mitchell," Morrison said, gesturing to chairs. "Princess Kira, please, sit. I need to understand our situation completely." Jake and Kira sat down. Kira spoke first, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "General Morrison, the Kralliks Empire is expanding aggressively. They want to control the space routes through this sector. If they capture me, they can force my father to give them passage through Veleron space. Once they control those routes, they will have access to dozens of other worlds, including Earth. And if we protect you?" Morrison asked. "Then you become their enemy. They will attack Earth to take me by force. Can your people help us?" Kira's expression turned sad. "I sent a distress signal before I crashed. My people will send ships, but it will take time. Weeks, maybe months. They are very far away. By the time they arrive, the Kralliks could have already conquered Earth." The room was quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. They were facing an enemy they couldn't beat. With no hope of reinforcements arriving in time, the logical choice was clear. Hand over the princess and hope the Kralliks would leave Earth alone. Jake spoke up. "With respect, I don't think giving her up is an option." "Why not, Mitchell?" "Because it won't stop with her. The Kralliks have already shown what they think of us. They violated our airspace, attacked us on our own soil, and now they're threatening us. If we give in to their demands, we're telling them, and every other alien power out there, that Earth can be pushed around. What happens the next time someone wants something from us?" Morrison studied Jake for a long moment. "You're suggesting we fight. I'm suggesting we show them who we are, sir. Maybe we can't win a straight fight, but we can make it cost them more than they're willing to pay. We can make them think twice about pushing us around. That's easy to say when you're one man, Mitchell. I'm responsible for millions of lives. I understand that, sir. But I've seen how the Kralliks fight. They're not ready for an enemy that doesn't play by their rules. They expect us to be scared, to run, to give up. What if we don't?" Stevens spoke up again. "Sir, I think Mitchell has a point. We can't match their technology, but we can be unpredictable. We can strike at times and places they don't expect. We can make this so difficult and costly that they decide the princess isn't worth the trouble." Kira looked around at the officers. "You would truly fight for me? For someone you just met? Knowing you will likely die?" Morrison shook his head. "Princess, with respect, this isn't just about you anymore. This is about Earth's place in the galaxy. We can't start our relationship with alien civilizations by being conquered or intimidated. We have to show them who we are, even if the odds are bad." Every farwer. Over the next 24 hours, the United States military mobilized in ways it hadn't since World War II. Bases around the world went to high alert. Missiles were armed and aimed at the sky. Fighter jets were scrambled. Ships put to sea. And in secret facilities, scientists worked desperately to understand and possibly replicate some of the alien technology. Jake stayed close to Kira throughout this time. She was overwhelmed by the speed and scale of the human response. On her world, such mobilization would take weeks of planning and debate, but humans were moving with desperate energy, preparing for a war they might not survive. "Are all humans like this?" Kira asked, as they watched soldiers drilling at a makeshift training ground. So quick to fight? Well, contender. Well, 507. Not really, Jake admitted. Most people just want to live in peace. But when we're threatened, when something important is at stake, we come together pretty fast. It's one of the few things we're really good at. I am afraid, Kira said quietly. So many will die because of me. Jake put a hand on her shoulder. They're not dying because of you. They're fighting because it's the right thing to do. Because giving in to bullies has never worked out well for anyone. The plan that Morrison and his staff developed was risky and relied heavily on the enemy, not expecting serious resistance. Human ships, hastily retrofitted with whatever weapons could be attached, would launch into orbit. They wouldn't try to win a conventional battle. Instead, they would be a distraction, a show of force that would tie up the Krallick's fleet. Meanwhile, on the ground, every military asset would be ready to shoot down any Krallick's ships that tried to land. The goal wasn't to destroy the enemy fleet. It was to make capturing the princess so difficult and costly that the Krallick's would decide it wasn't worth it. It's a gamble, Morrison admitted during the final briefing. We're betting that the Krallick's will cut their losses rather than commit to a full invasion. We're betting they don't want a long, costly war for one hostage. What if you're wrong? Kira asked. Then we fight anyway. Because that's what humans do. 3 modified shuttles launched from Cape Canaveral, rising into the sky on pillars of fire. They were barely space-worthy and carried weapons that were primitive compared to the Krallick's technology. But they were human ships, and they were going into battle. Captain Sarah Blake was aboard the lead shuttle, now designated as the Eagle 1. She had volunteered for the mission, as had every member of her crew. As they climbed toward orbit, she opened communications with the Krallick's fleet. This is Captain Sarah Blake of the United Earth Defense Force. You have violated our sovereign space and threatened our world. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The response came quickly, the voice harsh and mocking. Humans, you dare threaten us with your primitive technology? We could destroy your world from orbit. Surrender the princess now, or watch your cities burn. Sarah's jaw tightened. You want the princess? Come and take her. But I warn you, we humans have a saying. We don't go down easy. And we sure as hell don't surrender. She gave the order. And every weapon system on the 3 shuttles opened fire. The attack was more symbolic than effective. Most of the shots were deflected by Krallick's shields. But the message was clear. Earth would fight. The Krallick's fleet responded with overwhelming force, energy weapons lighting up the darkness of space. The battle that followed was one-sided and brutal. The human ships took heavy damage immediately. Systems failed, hulls breached, crew members died. But they didn't retreat. They kept fighting, kept shooting, kept transmitting defiant messages back to Earth. On the ground, Jake and Kira watched the battle on screens in the command center. Every hit on a human ship made Kira flinch. These people were dying for her, fighting an impossible battle because it was the right thing to do. She finally understood what the legends had been trying to say about humans. It wasn't that they were better warriors, it was that they simply refused to give up, no matter what. The battle raged for 3 hours. One human ship was destroyed completely, its crew lost. The other 2 were heavily damaged and barely functional. But they had bought time and proven something important. They had shown the Krallick's that Earth would fight. The Krallick's commander watched the battle with growing frustration. These humans were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to run when faced with superior technology. But instead, they kept fighting, even as their ships were torn apart. Even as they were clearly losing, they continued to shoot back, to transmit their defiant messages, to refuse surrender. It made no sense. Any logical species would have retreated by now. Any reasonable commander would have recognized the futility of resistance. But these humans seemed to have no concept of when they were beaten. The commander sent a message to his warriors on the planet's surface. Prepare landing teams. We will take the princess by force and leave this miserable world behind. But before the Kralliks could launch their ground assault, something happened that changed everything. A new contact appeared on their sensors, multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. The signature was unmistakable. Velaron, warships. The princess's people had arrived. On Earth, the command center erupted in cheers as they detected the new arrivals. 20 Velaron warships, sleek and powerful, were accelerating toward Earth at incredible speed. They had received Kira's distress signal and pushed their engines to dangerous limits to get here as fast as possible. Kira stared at the screen, tears running down her face. They came. My people came for me. Jake put his arm around her shoulders. Of course they did. You're their princess. The Velaran fleet commander opened communications with both the Kralliks and the humans. His voice was formal and angry. This is Commander Thal, of the Velaran Empire. Kralliks forces, you have attacked our princess and violated the territory of a protected world. Withdraw immediately or face destruction. The Kralliks commander found himself in a suddenly very different situation. He had come to capture one princess with minimal resistance. Now he was facing a Velaran battle fleet and a human force that refused to quit despite being completely outmatched. The mission had become far more complicated and costly than anyone had anticipated. After a tense 30 minutes, the Kralliks fleet began to withdraw. They jumped to light speed one by one, leaving the solar system behind. They had decided the princess wasn't worth fighting both the Velarans and these stubborn, irrational humans. As the last Kralliks ship disappeared, the tension in the command center broke. People cheered, hugged each other, and celebrated. They had done it. Earth had faced its first alien threat and survived. Commander Thal's ship landed at a military base in Nevada later that day. He was a tall, elegant alien with silver skin and calm eyes. He walked down the ramp with a squad of guards and was met by General Morrison, Jake, and Kira. Kira ran to her commander and spoke rapidly in her own language. Thal listened, then looked at the humans with what might have been respect. He switched to English, his translator making his words clear. General Morrison, on behalf of the Velaran Empire, I thank you for protecting our princess. We owe you a debt that cannot easily be repaid. Morrison shook the offered hand. We did what anyone should do. She needed help. Many species would have handed her over to avoid conflict. Your people chose to fight, despite overwhelming odds. That is worthy of great respect. Over the next few days, the situation slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. The Velaran fleet stayed in orbit, while their diplomats met with world leaders. Kira spent time with both her people and the humans, particularly Jake, who she had come to see as a true friend. A week after the battle, Kira was scheduled to return to her home world. A ceremony was held at the United Nations, where she would formally thank Earth for its help and sign the first treaties between humanity and the Velaran Empire. Kira stood before the assembled representatives of Earth's nations, wearing new ceremonial robes that shimmered with light. She looked every bit the princess she was, but Jake could see the changes in her. She stood straighter now, more confident. The experience had transformed her from a sheltered royal into someone who understood the real cost of leadership. People of Earth, Kira began, her voice carrying through the hall. When I crashed on your world, I believed the stories I had heard about humans. I thought you were savage warriors, violent and unpredictable. I was wrong. She paused, looking directly at Jake in the crowd. You are warriors. Yes, but you are also protectors, friends, and honorable beings. One of you, a simple hunter named Jake Mitchell, showed me that true strength is not about weapons or technology. It is about having the courage to stand up for what is right, even when the odds seem impossible. She addressed the entire assembly now. You could have surrendered me to avoid war. That would have been the logical choice. But instead, you fought. You sent your ships into space knowing they would likely be destroyed. You risked your world for a stranger. That is not savagery. That is nobility. Kira held up a datapad. My people have been part of the galactic community for thousands of years. We have treaties with dozens of species. But today, I am proud to offer Earth something special. Not just trade agreements or defensive pacts, though those will come. I offer you friendship and partnership. We will share our knowledge with you. We will help you reach the stars. And we will stand beside you when threats arise, as you stood beside me. The hall erupted in applause. Leaders from every nation stood and cheered. For the first time in human history, humanity was not alone in the universe, and they had made that first contact on their own terms, with their dignity intact. After the ceremony, Kira found Jake outside the building. He was uncomfortable in the formal suit they had given him and was trying to loosen his tie. Kira laughed at the sight. "You look miserable. I'm a hunter, not a diplomat. Give me a forest and a rifle over a suit and tie any day." They walked together through a small garden outside the UN building. It was a clear night, and stars were visible above the city lights. Somewhere up there, the Veleron fleet waited to take Kira home. "I will miss Earth," Kira said quietly. "I'll miss you too, Princess, but you'll be back, right? For all those diplomatic meetings and trade negotiations?" "Yes. And perhaps you could visit my world sometime? I would love to show you the crystal cities and the 3 moons. Though I warn you, palace life is very boring compared to fighting alien warriors in Montana." Jake smiled. "I don't know. I've had enough excitement to last me a while. But I'd like to see your home. Learn more about the galaxy we're apparently part of now." Kira took his hand. "You changed my life, Jake Mitchell. You showed me that the galaxy's greatest warriors are not the ones with the best weapons or the most advanced technology. They are the ones who refuse to abandon their principles, no matter the cost. That is a lesson I will carry with me forever. And you showed me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is help someone who needs it, no matter how complicated it makes things." They stood there for a while, 2 friends from different worlds, looking up at the stars. Neither of them spoke, but they didn't need to. They had been through something extraordinary together, and that bond would last regardless of the distance between their worlds. A few months later, Jake received a package at his home in Montana. Inside was a small device with a note written in English. The note was from Kira. "Jake, this is a communicator. Press the button and it will connect to me. No matter where in the galaxy either of us might be. I hope you will use it sometimes. Your friend across the stars, Kira." Jake smiled and put the device on his desk. Then, he grabbed his rifle and headed out for another hunting trip. Life was returning to normal, or at least as normal as life could be after making first contact with aliens and fighting a battle against an alien empire. But normal was overrated anyway. On Valara, Princess Kira stood in her father's palace, looking out at the 3 moons rising over the crystal spires of the capital city. She had given her report about Earth and the humans. Her father had listened carefully and agreed that humanity would make strong allies. "You have changed, my daughter," the Emperor said, standing beside her. "This experience has shaped you." "Yes, father. I learned that being strong does not mean being the most powerful. It means standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. The humans taught me that. Wen's taught me that. And this Jake Mitchell, he is important to you?" Kira nodded. "He is a friend, a true friend. He risked everything to protect me when he had no reason to. That kind of loyalty is rare in the galaxy." The Emperor put his hand on her shoulder. "Then we must ensure that Earth and its people are protected. They have proven themselves worthy of our respect and our alliance." Across the galaxy, other species were learning about what had happened at Earth. The story spread quickly. A primitive world had faced down a Kralix attack force and refused to surrender, despite having technology that was thousands of years behind their enemies. The humans had fought with courage and determination that shocked the galactic community. The old treaties that said to avoid human space were updated. Now, they said something different. They said that humanity was a species to respect, to trade with, and to never underestimate. The stories about human warriors were no longer dismissed as myths. They were accepted as truth. And on Earth, humanity looked to the stars with new eyes. They were no longer alone. They had allies, friends, and a place in the galactic community. They had proven themselves not through conquest or domination, but through courage and honor. Jake Mitchell went on many more hunting trips in the Montana wilderness. Sometimes he used the communicator to talk with Kira, sharing stories about his world while she told him about hers. She visited Earth several times over the years, always making time to see her friend. And whenever she told the story of how humans became part of the galactic community, she always started the same way. I believed human warriors were only myths until I met one. His name was Jake Mitchell, and he showed me that the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy are not the ones with the best weapons. They are the ones who fight for something bigger than themselves. They are the ones who never give up, who protect the weak, and who stand by their principles no matter the cost. That is what makes humans special. That is why they will never be conquered. The legend had become reality, and humanity had earned its place among the stars not through fear, but through honor, courage, and the simple act of doing what was right. Years later, when humans built their first true starships and began exploring the galaxy, they carried with them the reputation that Jake and his fellow humans had earned. They were warriors when they needed to be, but they were also explorers, friends, and defenders of those who needed help. And whenever alien species asked why humans were so willing to fight for others, even strangers, the answer was always the same. Because it's the right thing to do. That simple philosophy, more than any weapon or technology, was what made humanity special in the galaxy. And it all started with a hunter in Montana who found a crashed alien princess and decided to help her, no matter the cost. The myths had been true all along. Human warriors were real. And they were exactly as the stories described. Not because they loved violence, but because they refused to stand by when someone needed help. Because they believed that some things were worth fighting for. And that made all the difference.